Okay, the second Gestalt principle of form perception and the first grouping principle that we're going to talk about is the principle of proximity. The word proximity refers to how close together two things are in space. And so the Gestalt grouping principle of proximity says that when we see things which are close together, we tend to group them as one figure as opposed to multiple. So if we look at these two images, first we have a grid pattern of squares here on the left, and then we have same number of squares but just separated out on your right. The first image looks like one cluster of squares. We see it as one grid because they're evenly spaced. In the second image, we now see three clusters. Because of the fact that they've been grouped differently in terms of how close together they are, our mind is going to perceive them a little bit differently. Same number of dots, but now we're going to see the second image as being three groups as opposed to one big cluster. Now, this is showing the same thing, only here we're seeing how proximity changes whether we see something in terms of columns as opposed to rows. Because in the first image, those squares are closer together vertically, we're going to perceive them as columns. In the second image, we've just taken that square and we've turned it, and now we're going to see it as rows, because again, the squares are closer together horizontally as opposed to vertically. And you can try on this one especially. In case you were wondering if the bells still went off when we have holidays, we've answered that question now. They do. It's 11:15, so if you have first lunch, you'd be going now. So anyway, in this image, you can see that it doesn't matter how long you stare at either one of them or how hard you try, you're not really going to be able to take the first image and see it as rows instead of columns because this principle is so strong. So you can't really override your tendency to see things as a whole or to see them through a Gestalt lens. Last image, kind of applying this principle to the real world before we maybe show you some of the classroom and show how this happens as well. In this picture, we can clearly see one grouping of people standing here, and then another person kind of standing off to themselves right here, and then we see like another group of people all the way over here. And when we look at this image, we perceive those people as being in very distinct groups or distinct clusters. And the reason why we perceive them in that way is because of their proximity. The three individuals standing here together are closer together than they are to this one girl standing off by herself, and all of these people are way closer to each other than they are to these individuals over here. And so here we can see in a real world kind of situation how the principle of proximity works. Proximity also allows us to really easily and really clearly see differences, or rather not see differences, but see things which have been set apart. With all of these Gestalt principles, they refer to how we group things together, but then based on this grouping, we also see things which are sort of outcasts. So if we were to look at the classroom, and I'm not entirely sure where the camera is going to be focusing, you can clearly see, well, one, you can see how messy it is. I'm kind of cleaning this weekend. But then when we look at my room right now, we see it in terms of rows. And you can see that you have one group of desks against the board, then another group, then another group. Then if we look over here, we'll see that there's a group of desks that has kind of been moved together. And so now instead of just seeing rows, we also see those two as being set apart. And so again, because of how the desks are spaced, it's going to change our perception of them. All right, so the next principle we'll do is continuity, and I'll make a new video for that one.